Hello again. We tend to like our history to be a neat and orderly sequence of events with well-defined dates that we can remember. Battle of Hastings, 1066. Julius Caesar invades Britain, 55 BC. That sort of thing. The First World War, 1914 to 1918. Second World War, 1939 to 1945. Of course, history isn't really like this. We can't choose some specific date and say such and such a thing began at that time. Not really. Those dates are completely arbitrary and they reflect our own national concerns. We say that the Second World War started in 1939 because that just happens to be the year that Britain declared war on Germany. We all know about Neville Chamberlain saying, I have to tell you now that a state of war exists between Britain and Germany and the rest of it. That was not when the war actually began, not when the World War started. It just coincidentally was when we became involved. Fighting had already been taking place across Europe, Asia and Africa years before Britain involved itself in the affair. You might, if you were Chinese, date the Second World War from 1931, when the Japanese invaded Manchuria. If you're Ethiopian, then the war began in 1935, when Italy invaded that part of Africa. Czechs might say that the German occupation of the Sudetenland in 1938 was the beginning of the Second World War. We are currently in a very similar situation as the invasion and ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh recently showed. All over the world, there are an increasing number of small wars, and larger wars indeed, leading to refugee crises on an unprecedented scale. Even if Britain wished to remain aloof from these things, the influx of asylum seekers shows that this is simply not possible. What happens in Ukraine or Sudan today will end up with this country having a shortage of social housing or rioting on the streets tomorrow. The world is so closely interconnected these days that everything tends to affect us. Just as before the Second World War, we are seeing a realigning of borders, a spate of civil wars and various territorial disputes exploding into open war. Central Africa is descending into violence, with civil wars and military coups being the order of the day. In Ukraine and Azerbaijan, people are redefining borders by armed force. And in the Far East, China is flexing its muscles. The attacks on Israel today are part of the same process. The Iranians are seeking hegemony in the Middle East, and they use organisations like Hezbollah and Hamas as their instruments to achieve this and to destabilise the region. Israel, for its part, is very keen to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities and prevent them from acquiring nuclear weapons. At some stage, Israel must logically attack Iran, possibly using their own nuclear weapons to destroy the Iranian research centres, which are all hidden under mountain ranges. All these minor wars in faraway countries have the ability to trigger confrontations between the world powers, bringing America and Russia into conflict, or NATO and Russia, China and Australia. Europe, North Africa, all the pieces are in place just as they were in the late 1930s for a huge conflagration which will change the world forever. Every day brings a new example of the desperately dangerous situation which the world is in, and the war now being fought in Israel is simply a symptom of this. It could prove the trigger, though, for a wider conflict, and if so, then countries like China, Russia and Iran will surely try to take advantage of it. While the world watches the Middle East, as they are today, some people will take the chance to settle old scores elsewhere, in exactly the same way that Azerbaijan did lately when they drove the Armenians out of Nagorno-Karabakh.